A quote from Plato: "Wisdom is correctly given the name beautiful, since it performs the works that we say are beautiful and welcome as such." Hello, and welcome back to the Disputed Questions Podcast, episode 4. In this episode, we are continuing our trek through the text of Aristotle's Categories. In the previous episode, we saw that the second chapter of the Categories contains two divisions, one of things which are said and the other of things which are. We discussed the first division into simple and complex expressions. Now we turn to the second. The text, which consists of the remainder of the second chapter, reads as follows. Quote, "Of things themselves, some are predicable of a subject and are never present in a subject. Thus, man is predicable of the individual man and is never present in a subject. By being present in a subject, I do not mean present as parts are present in a whole, but being incapable of existence apart from the said subject. Some things, again, are present in a subject, but are never predicable of a subject. For instance, a certain point of grammatical knowledge is present in the mind, but is not predicable of any subject. Or again, a certain whiteness may be present in the body, for color requires a material basis, yet it is never predicable of anything. Other things, again, are both predicable of a subject and present in a subject. Thus, while knowledge is present in the human mind, it is predicable of grammar. There is, lastly, a class of things which are neither present in a subject nor predicable of a subject, such as the individual man or the individual horse. But, to speak more generally, that which is individual and has the character of a unit is never predicable of a subject. Yet in some cases there is nothing to prevent such being present in a subject. Thus, a certain point of grammatical knowledge is present in a subject." End quote. This is a longer passage and is also one of the more central passages of the whole text. Indeed, Paul Stuttman writes that there is, quote, "widespread agreement that at the very heart of the categories are two systems of classification," end quote. One being the classificatory system of the 10 categories themselves, the other being the classificatory system of our present text. So in other words, according to Stuttman, this passage is the very heart of the whole text of the categories, right alongside the presentation of the categories themselves. Why this is, we shall try to discuss later. For now, let's break down the text itself a bit further. The passage gives a division of things there are into 4 classes, and these 4 classes depend in turn on a prior, more fundamental twofold division. The twofold division consists of a distinction between being predicable of a subject on the one hand and being present in a subject on the other. The different manners of combination of these two distinct classes, along with their negations, results in the derivation of the fourfold division, which consists of 1. Things predicable of but not present in a subject, 2. Things present in but not predicable of a subject, 3. Things both predicable of and present in a subject, and 4. Things neither present in nor predicable of a subject. We will return to the fourfold division later. For now, let's focus on the more fundamental twofold division. A number of questions immediately arise. What does it mean to be predicable of or present in? What is the relation between these two classes? How does Aristotle derive the distinction between the two? Before we even try to answer these, however, I want to note one thing first. The text, as we've said, is a division of things which are. The Greek reads tone on tone, literally of things or of beings. Notice the parallel of this with the beginning of the previous text, which, as we saw in the last episode, begins with tone legomenon, or of things spoken. Both passages also share a certain clausal structure, both being ordered according to the Greek phrases men and de, or on the one hand, on the other hand. It seems clear to me, therefore, that the philosopher intended these passages to share some parallel relation. What precisely that relation is, I don't want to discuss here, but just keep this in mind as we proceed. So what does it mean to be predicable of and present in a subject? For the first, the Greek is kath hupakemenu legete. Sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation. And Ackrell translates this as said of a subject. For the second, the Greek is in hupakemeno estin, which means to be in a subject. So both phrases pick out some relation to a subject, a hupakemenon, which means literally something lying under something else. But is the term subject being used univocally or equivocally here? According to the LSJ lexicon, the term hupakemenon has at least three main philosophical usages in Aristotle. First, the matter which underlies form. Second, the substance which underlies accidents. And third, the logical subject to which attributes are ascribed or predicated. As we can see then, the term subject is used in various ways throughout Aristotle's works, although in each instance it retains the basic sense of something which underlies or receives something else. It seems to me, therefore, that the term in its different functions has perhaps a not purely univocal but analogous extension. But in what sense or senses is it being used in the present text? At the very least, it would appear that the relation of being in a subject uses the second sense of subject, that of a substance as a subject of accidents. Accidents here is a technical term. It doesn't mean what we usually understand an accident to be, as something which happens by chance or without intention. So, like, I accidentally fell down the stairs, something like that. An accident for Aristotle is some aspect or attribute of a thing which can only exist in that thing and not on its own. For example, the height of a thing is an accident of it, since the thing has its height, and height cannot exist apart from the things which have it. But why think Aristotle means accidents here? In the text, Aristotle defines in a subject as not meaning present as parts are present in a whole, but being incapable of existence apart from the said subject. And he gives as an example of something present in, but not said of a subject, a certain whiteness present in a body, which would seem to be a clear case of an accident in a substance. Indeed, in his work The Topics, when Aristotle defines accident, he defines it as, quote, something which, though it is not a definition, nor a property, nor a genus, yet belongs to the thing, and something which may either belong or not belong to any one and the self-same thing, as whiteness, end quote. So from these considerations, it would appear that the relation of being in a subject picks out the relation of an accident to a substance, something which inheres in a substance and cannot exist on its own separately or apart from the substance it exists in. So if the relation in a subject uses subject in the sense of the relation between substance and accidents, what does the phrase said of a subject mean? If we take the three uses from above and rule out subject as substance, we are left with subject as matter for substance and subject as logical subject. It seems rather clear right away that it does not mean subject as matter. Of things said of but not present in a subject, the example given is that of man being said of an individual man. But obviously, an individual man is not identical with the matter of the individual man. And also, man is not predicated of matter, but of the whole individual man. So that leaves the sense of subject as a logical subject. And that would make sense given that the phrase said of seems to refer to predication and affirmative propositions. At the same time, there is a certain tension in that, as we have just seen, the example given for something said of but not present in a subject is an individual man, i.e. an individual particular substance. And such a substance is not merely a logical subject, but is also the real subject of accidents. It seems to me, though, that this is not a very serious difficulty. Aristotle does not always draw as sharp a line between the domains of logic and metaphysics as more recent philosophers have, and he explicitly states that an individual substance can be a subject of predication. The same subject thus exists in both the logical and real orders, if we can even properly make an absolute distinction between the two. Perhaps a better way to describe it would be the concrete order and the predicational order. In the concrete order, a particular substance is the concrete subject of concrete accidents, actually inhering in that substance. In the predicational order, that same substance is a subject to which attributes may be predicated. We'll speak more on this further on. If what I've said so far makes absolutely no sense, don't stress about it. Perhaps a better way to approach the whole thing would be like this. For Aristotle, what is absolutely fundamental in reality is concrete particular substances, like this particular tree or this particular woman or that particular cat. These are the basic real things. Aristotle calls these primary substances, as we shall see later. Now, such primary substances can serve as subjects in at least two distinct senses. First, primary substances are subjects in which concrete accidents inhere. For instance, a particular horse is brown in color. A concrete instance of the color brown thus inheres in the substance that is the horse. The horse is the subject for that concrete instance of the color brown. But not only do concrete things, namely accidents, exist in primary substances, other things are also said of or said about these substances. For instance, if I see an individual horse, I call it a horse. I say it is an animal, etc. And so a primary substance can also function as a subject of predication. I can predicate things of a primary substance. This whole section then seems to be depicting the different ways things can relate to primary substances. Although it must be said that Aristotle approaches this task in a somewhat peculiar fashion, since he states the relations first and only reaches primary substances at the very end. There may be some reason for this, but I cannot speak to what it might be here. There's also a question of whether these two relations to subject, present in and said of, are the only two possible relations to subject. And if not, what others are there, and why does Aristotle not speak of them? But once again, these are questions which go outside the scope of the text itself, and so I won't attempt to address them here either. Instead, let's now move from the fundamental twofold division to the fourfold division derived therefrom. The fourfold division results simply from combining the affirmations and negations of the twofold division. From this we get things 1, said of and present in a subject, 2, said of and not present in a subject, 3, not said of and present in a subject, 4, not said of and not present in a subject. The order Aristotle gives in the text is things 1, said of but not present in, 2, present in but not said of, 3, both said of and present in, and 4, neither said of nor present in. As we've already mentioned, he gives the primary substances last, things neither said of nor present in a subject. And again, it is somewhat odd that he defines these primary substances in purely negative terms, since they are for him the primary fundamental positive entities. Perhaps it is because everything else must be defined in relation to primary substances, while primary substances cannot be defined in relation to other things, and so can only be defined negatively with respect to those other things. In any case, we have here a distinction between 4 classes of things. Simplicius notes that technically it is a sixfold division, but 2 classes bring about contradiction and so are non-existent, in his words. These 2 classes would be things said of and not said of, and things present in and not present in. Since these are so obviously contradictory, it's not really worth mentioning them as real classes alongside the other 4, which pick out real things or kinds of things, at least in some sense. But what exactly do the 4 classes pick out? What do they mean? Well, we've already seen that to be present in is to be an accident, and to be said of is to be some predicate attributed to a subject. So, things said of but not present in a subject would be predicates which are not inherent accidents. Things present in but not said of a subject would be accidents which are not predicates. Things said of and present in a subject would be things which are both accidents and predicates, and things neither present in nor said of a subject would be neither accidents nor predicates. As I've said, this last class picks out primary substances, i.e. individual substances. So let's try starting with these and then see if we can make sense of the other classes. Primary substances, again, are concrete individual whole things, like a human, a tree, a dog, etc. Living things are the best, clearest examples of such substances, but non-living things can be substances too, even though it's at times difficult to pick out exactly which non-living things count as substances. Primary substances are things which are neither present in nor said of a subject, i.e. neither accidents nor predicates. So Aristotle will say in chapter 5 of the Categories, quote, "A substance, that which is called a substance most strictly, primarily, and most of all, is that which is neither said of a subject nor in a subject, e.g. the individual man or the individual horse," end quote. It's pretty easy to see why substances aren't present in a subject. Substances are the subjects of accidents. Substances are whole things which exist individually, while accidents are only modifications or attributes of things. But why aren't primary substances said of a subject? Why can't primary substances serve as predicates? After all, can't I say something like, "This man is Socrates," or "Socrates is this man"? And in these sentences, isn't the particular substance predicated of a subject, even if that subject is itself? On this point, Robin Smith makes a useful distinction between grammatical predication and genuine or real predication. As he notes, quote, "We can readily enough construct a sentence with Socrates as its grammatical predicate, such as, 'The person sitting down is Socrates.' Aristotle, however, does not consider this a genuine predication. He calls it instead a merely accidental or incidental, kata symbebikos, predication. Such sentences are, for him, dependent for their truth values on other genuine predications, in this case, Socrates is sitting down." End quote. The reasons why Aristotle thought that using a particular as a predicate is not proper predication are complex, and we won't explore them fully here. Briefly, though, I'll just point out that Aristotle thought that demonstration could not be infinite in either an upward or downward direction. In other words, we cannot go demonstrating forever, but eventually must come in one direction to something which is a predicate of other things, but of which nothing else is predicated, and in the other direction we must come to something of which other things are predicated, but which itself is not predicated of anything further. This latter thing is the primary substances, the individual substances. We must also remember again that for Aristotle the logical and metaphysical orders are closely aligned. So for Aristotle, what is a subject in nature, i.e. a metaphysical subject, is also properly a logical subject. Listen to this passage from the Prior Analytics. Quote, "Of all the things which exist, some are such that they cannot be predicated of anything else truly and universally, i.e. Cleon and Callias, i.e. the individual and sensible, but other things may be predicated of them, for each of these is both man and animal, and some things are themselves predicated of others, but nothing prior is predicated of them, and some are predicated of others, and yet others of them, e.g. man of Callias and animal of man. It is clear then that some things are naturally not said of anything, for as a rule each sensible thing is such that it cannot be predicated of anything, save incidentally. For we sometimes say that white object is Socrates, or that which approaches is Callias." End quote. Notice that he says some things are naturally not said of anything else, even if it may happen that linguistically or grammatically we can say them of something. So in the sentence, the person approaching is Callias, we say Callias of a subject. But in fact, in reality, Callias just is the actual subject, the thing approaching. Callias is the real subject of the attribute walking. So in summary, for Aristotle, particular substances cannot be predicates. Rather, predicates are properly universal or common. Smith writes, quote, "The word universal, katalu, appears to be an Aristotelian coinage. Literally, it means of a whole. Its opposite is therefore of a particular, or kath hekeston. Kath hekeston. Universal terms are those which can properly serve as predicates, while particular terms are those which cannot." End quote. So those things which are said of something or predicated of something are, according to the traditional understanding, properly universals. A universal term is an abstract term which can apply to many different items. So the term human is a universal term because it can be attributed to many individual humans, e.g. Socrates, Plato, Julius Caesar, etc. All of these individuals fall under the general category of human. Other universal terms include green, tall, and old. All of these, then, are terms which are said of a subject. But a primary substance, according to Aristotle, cannot be said of a subject because it is an individual thing rather than a general or universal term. Again, the examples he gives of things neither said of nor present in a subject are the individual man and the individual horse. And the reason why these cannot be present in nor said of a subject is because they are the subject, the most primary, basic sort of subject. So again, he says in this passage that which is individual and has the character of a unit is never predicable of a subject. Or, as Ackrell translates it, things that are individual and numerically one are, without exception, not said of any subject. So that is the fourth class, the class of primary substances. What about the first class, the class of things said of but not present in a subject? Well, if things said of a subject are universals and things present in a subject are accidents, then things said of but not present in a subject must be universal substances, i.e. non-particular substances. But what might these be? In chapter 5, Aristotle calls these secondary substances to distinguish them from the primary substances we've already discussed. In the present text, Aristotle explains as an example that man is predicable of the individual man and is never present in a subject. Again, the term man or human is general and universal because it can be properly attributed to many different individuals. Socrates is human, Plato is human, Rachel is human, Sarah is human, etc. As Ackrell explains, a secondary substance is the species or genus of a thing, using these terms in their logical rather than their biological senses. In the Topics, Aristotle defines a genus as, quote, "what is predicated in what a thing is of a number of things exhibiting differences in kind. We should treat as predicates in what a thing is all such things as would be appropriate to mention in reply to the question, what is the object in question? As, for example, in the case of man, if asked that question, it is appropriate to say, he is an animal." End quote. Let's break this down a bit. A genus, according to Aristotle, is what is predicated in what a thing is of a number of things exhibiting differences in kind. It seems to me that what this means is that the genus is the part of the definition of what a thing is, which can also be common to other things differing in kind from the thing in question. For example, suppose we ask, what is a human? And someone answers, a human is a rational animal. The rational part is what is unique to humans, what makes humans humans and distinguishes them from other kinds of things. But the animal part is common to other kinds of things besides just humans. Cows are animals, birds are animals, whales are animals, etc. Cows, birds, and whales are not humans. They are really different kinds of things than humans, but they are all really animals. Animal thus provides a general umbrella category under which different kinds of distinct but related things fall. Animal is thus a genus. For Aristotle, individual things fall under the common category of a species, and species themselves fall under the still more general category of a genus. So Socrates is an individual of the species human, and human is a species falling under the category animal. Both species and genus are universal substances which fall under the second class of things which are said of a subject but not present in a subject. Aristotle calls both species and genus secondary substances. So he says in chapter 5 that, quote, the species in which the things primarily called substances are called secondary substances, as also are the genera of these species. For example, the individual man belongs in a species man, and animal is a genus of the species. So these, both man and animal, are called secondary substances. End quote. In chapter 5, Aristotle will also explain that species are more properly called substances than genera because they are closer to primary substances. It might then be appropriate to refer to species as secondary substances and genera as tertiary substances, although Aristotle does not use this language himself. The reason why species are closer to primary substances than genera is because quote, if one is to say of the primary substance what it is, it will be more informative and apt to give the species than the genus. For example, it would be more informative to say of the individual man that he is a man than that he is an animal, since the one is more distinctive of the individual man while the other is more general, end quote. And that was from also chapter 5 of the Categories. One might ask in what sense secondary substances are actually substances. After all, I can actually point out primary substances, but I can't do the same with secondary substances. I can't see or experience the abstract concept giraffe like I can see and experience an individual concrete giraffe. So again, how are secondary substances substances? Aristotle answers that they are substances in the sense that they are properly subjects. In chapter 5, again, he writes, quote, it is because primary substances are subjects for all the other things, and all the other things are predicated of them or are in them, that they are called substances most of all. But as the primary substances stand to the other things, so the species stands to the genus. The species is a subject for the genus, for the genera are predicated of the species, but the species are not predicated reciprocally of the genera. End quote. Here it is indicated that there is a kind of asymmetrical, non-reciprocal relationship which exists between certain items and others, which makes one set more properly subjects than the other. I can say the horse is brown, but I can't properly say that brown is the horse, because the color brown is not a subject for the horse. In other words, I can attribute the color brown to a horse, but I cannot attribute a horse to the color brown. The color brown is not identical with the horse. Similarly, I can say horses are animals, but I cannot say that animals are horses, because not all animals are horses. There are no horses which aren't also animals, but there are plenty of animals which aren't also horses. This indicates that the species horse is more properly a subject than its genus, and it is in this sense that the species horse is called a substance. Another consideration is that the term horse, although abstract, names a kind of substance. Every horse, every individual which falls under the category of horse, is a substance. So horse is a category of substance. But there is still the question of in what sense secondary substances are real, and in what sense can they be said to exist. Famously, Plato held that abstract concepts are subsistent, i.e., they actually exist as independent objects in their own right, and indeed are more real than the concrete particulars which participate in them. This was Plato's theory of forms or ideas. But Aristotle is often thought to have rejected his teacher's theory on this point. If that is so, then how can he here say that species and genera are among the things which are? We cannot here get into a discussion of Aristotle's exact understanding of universals, but we can point out that just because someone holds that universals are in some sense real, that fact alone does not thereby commit them to a full-blown Platonism. In other words, it is in principle possible for someone to hold that universals are real, but not subsistently real, as Plato did. With secondary substances out of the way, we can next address things present in but not said of a subject. What are these? Well, if things in a subject are accidents and things said of a subject are universals, then things in a subject but not said of a subject must be non-universal accidents, i.e., particular accidents. An example would be this particular height present in a particular person, or this particular instance of the color brown present in a brown horse, or this particular roundness present in a particular apple. Aristotle gives as examples a certain point of grammatical knowledge present in the mind but not predicable of any subject, and a certain whiteness present in the body. A particular accident is a numerically distinct accident, even if it specifically or qualitatively is identical to some other numerically distinct accident. For instance, the exact same shade of brown may exist in two distinct brown horses, but the two distinct instances of the color brown, though the same in quality, differ numerically, i.e., they are not numerically identical. The brownness of horse A is a different instance of the color than the brownness of horse B, and part of why they differ is precisely insofar as they belong to distinct subjects, one to horse A and the other to horse B. Now, in more recent years, there has been some debate on this class of items. The interpretation I've given, Stutman calls the orthodox interpretation amongst Aristotle's medieval interpreters. But, as Stutman explains, there is another interpretation recently offered by G.E.L. Owen. Stutman writes, quote, "According to Owen, Aristotle did not accept the existence of non-substantial particulars. Instead, Owen argues, a being that is not said of but present in primary substances is an accidental universal of the lowest possible generality. Hence, Owen denies that the said of, not said of distinction is one between universals and particulars." End quote. I will not get into this debate here. For now, I will simply follow the more traditional interpretation. Next, Aristotle says there are things which are both said of and present in a subject. Based on our pattern, it is clear that such objects are universal accidents. Aristotle explains that, quote, "Thus, while knowledge is present in the human mind, it is predicable of grammar," end quote. Now, how is it that knowledge as a universal accident is present in the human mind? For shouldn't it only be particular accidents which are actually present in particular substances? This question is resolved if we read Aristotle as saying here that knowledge is the kind of thing particular instances of which are present in the human mind, i.e., knowledge is a kind of accident, not a kind of substance, because wherever particular instances of it exist, they exist only as present in another and not as individual wholes in their own rights. So this wraps up our discussion of the fourfold classification in the second chapter of Aristotle's Categories. So just to recap, the fourfold classifications are particular accidents, universal accidents, universal substances, and particular substances, which are the primary substances. So this episode will be released somewhere around 6.5 months after the previous episode, which was released towards the end of July 2020, and it's now midway through February 2021. During this gap, I moved from Tennessee to Arizona. I started a new job as an assistant fifth grade teacher, and I have applied to PhD programs, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. So in this time, I didn't have much opportunity to work on the podcast. I hope once again to start releasing episodes more consistently, perhaps around once a month would be a good goal. So in the next episode, we'll pick up with chapter 3 of the categories. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review on whatever platform you're listening from, and also be sure to share with friends. So until next time, thanks for listening.